Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 4, Episode 51. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. This week we'll discuss the President Elon meme, will it be effective? I went to the Phoenix Suns game against the Indiana Pacers, and I have some comments not only about the Phoenix Suns, but the state of NBA basketball. And The Athletic came out with an article about the New York Jets, the now Detroit Lions, laughingstock of the National Football League. What does a fan do when they know the team that they love will be perpetually incompetent, given not a player, not a coach, but the owner? Thank you all to my loyal listeners. If you're new to the podcast, please like, subscribe, thumbs up, 5-star, write a review, send to friends and enemies far and wide. This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting.
Act 1. The President Elon meme might be effective.
My understanding is that this past weekend, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, were all together at some public event, a professional wrestling event. Ugh. And then not even a full week later, Elon Musk sends out a tweet about how the Republican Party should not support this bipartisan spending bill that was going to come to the floor for a vote in the House of Representatives. Not sure if they had all the requisite votes to get it passed in the Senate. The point being that these relevant parties are all in proximity to one another over the course of the weekend. Not a full week later, a huge piece of legislation that's pending on the floor, Elon Musk comes out and says don't support it. Several other of the Republican luminaries, I guess you call them, the influencers in the social media space, they begin their lampoon of this proposed legislation. And before you know it, the Republican Party has backed away from their own speaker. They have backed away from supporting this legislation for fear that if they do support it, Elon Musk is going to spend the money to have them primaried the next time they are up for re-election. Trump parrots this movement, stating that he does not support the legislation either, and now we have what we will call a lame duck Speaker of the House for the Republican Party, who very likely will not be Speaker of the House in the year of our Lord 2025. Why do I mention all of this? The Democrats, smartly, in my mind, smartly started calling Elon Musk President Musk. I've seen this meme a few times, and if I'm seeing it, I'm the last guy to know on the internet. It's got to be swirling around like wildfire. The progression of how this all played out is what I want to comment on. That you had the relevant parties sitting together. Everyone should have known. I'm using that term. That's a legal term, but it's also a social term, a colloquial term. Everyone should have known that this legislation was being solidified, that the particulars were being combed through as there was a government funding deadline, so now the government is facing a shutdown, and B, the Republican Party maintaining their majority in the House of Representatives would have to be the prime mover for getting the legislation drafted and presented to its members and members of the opposite party to see if they can't get it passed. Apparently, this wasn't on Trump's radar as recently as last weekend. And then when Elon makes his infamous tweet, he says don't support it, and he gets that groundswell of energy within the Republican Party to not support it, not only from other Republican influencers, but from the members themselves under threat of being primaried. It reminds me of the way things were conducted in the first Trump administration, that there wasn't someone in Trump's ear who programmatically understood all of these different bureaucratic deadlines, all of the different legislative and judicial deadlines that influence the executive branch of the government of the United States. I've read several things about Tesla. I've read several things about Elon Musk. He has a very different approach to how a business is run than you would see in any type of large organization. Elon embraces the chaos. Elon embraces the uncertainty. These environments are not uncomfortable for him, or to the extent that they are, he operates in them very fluidly. So having this disjointed communication pattern between such high-level stakeholders, that's not uncommon for an Elon-run organization. That is going to make it very difficult to run the largest and most complicated organization on planet Earth, the U.S. government. It is going to further place pressure on Trump's inner circle to be aware of these things, because you do not want to have the perception that an outside influencer like Elon Musk can come in and influence policy to the extent that he just has, where the president is following his lead. Perhaps Trump is a changed man. Perhaps he is going to approach his relationship to other luminaries inside of government, inside of the Republican Party, in business, in politics. Perhaps he's going to have a different relationship with all of these other brightly shining stars. In the past, Trump has always had to be the brightest shining star, and anything that dimmed that shine, he shit on, and did so quickly. So calling out immediately the fact that Trump had to march to the tune of Elon's drum in this incident is very, very telling for me that the Democrats are going to try to play Elon against Donald Trump in the public. Let's see if Trump takes the bait.
Act 2, the Phoenix Suns and the larger problems with the NBA.
I did a segment when the Phoenix Suns were 9-1, and I stated very clearly that this team is going to be a force to reckon with if they can all stay healthy and on the floor together. And then the Phoenix Suns proceeded to not stay healthy and be on the floor together, both Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal, as they have been wont to do over the past, 4, 5, 6 seasons. They get hurt, they're out of the lineup, and the Suns turn around after a 9-1 start, and I go, I believe, 1-8. This unfortunately demonstrates how dependent they are on a few key players in order to execute on their offensive and defensive strategy. The Phoenix Suns played the Indiana Pacers in Phoenix. I attended this game in person, and I have a few comments on not just the state of the Phoenix Suns, but the state of the NBA. First and foremost, the Phoenix Suns took 33 pointers in that game. They made 9. They had 16 turnovers, and that led to 29 points for the Indiana Pacers. So it should come as no surprise to anyone that the Indiana Pacers, a team that is below 500, won that basketball game. Indiana, for their part, shot 41 three-pointers and made 16 of them. There's a rash of videos going around now on social media. Again, if I've seen it, you know it's popular because I'm the last guy to know. There's a rash of videos going around about how there's too many three-pointers being shot in the NBA. And I agree with that. There are way too many three-pointers being shot in today's game. But after watching a game in person and seeing what goes on, there are two other observations that I have. One, there's no defense played in this league. There's absolutely no defense whatsoever. You hear these defensive chants at these arenas. I'm telling you right now, when you were watching these guys play in person and you see the amount of effort that they're putting forth, there is not a team defensive strategy. I've talked about this in the past. I'm going to make a couple of comments here, things that I've said in the past. Yes, I understand that there's too many games being played. Yes, I understand that in this modern NBA, the rules now have been tweaked to favor the offense, so much so that everyone understands that there's more wins for the team, there's more money for the individual player if we play a certain style of basketball, putting points up on the board. The long-term reward for any individual player playing great defense are probably not as great as that player's opportunity for upside by saying, I score this many points, I make this many threes, I have this many assists. But this isn't a comment on whether or not there's too many games, these guys don't play defense because they're tired, what have you. These teams now are running specific plays simply to get up the three-point shot. And I am flabbergasted at when these shots don't go down, how little teams have in the way of other plays to run or other ideas as to how to score round ball into round hole. Indiana, for their part, did this on numerous occasions. Yes, they were shooting a lot of threes, but what they were doing was running an action that when they started to run a play set up for a three, they had guys cutting to the basket. So they had the opportunity to either shoot the three-point shot or to pass the ball down into the paint and have a guy cutting to the basket for either a layup or a dunk. And this worked on numerous occasions. The Phoenix Suns seemed incapable of doing this same thing. In the instances where they went to the basket, it was individual players making individual plays in isolation, simply going to the basket. And they did not do that frequently enough. Devin Booker had his moments driving to the basket. Bradley Beal, thank you for coming back and playing basketball for the Phoenix Suns. He had his moments driving to the basket. But these were few and far between. I noted that neither team throughout the course of this game in any way, shape, or form ran a pick and roll or anything like it. And don't tell me that you have to have the right personnel to run a pick and roll. It's the NBA. Both of these teams have several guys over 6'6", 6'7", right? You got a guy who is 6'8", 6'9", 6'10", and you run him with a point guard out on a wing. You can run the pick and roll. You can get a different action going besides running plays for threes to get the ball moving towards the basket. It's not just the players who've embraced the three ball. These teams are running plays for players to get in position to shoot the three. The Suns did this on so many occasions that I started to yell at them, stop throwing the ball to the wing when you're standing in the paint. These are guys who are either running into the paint or are standing in the paint and getting the ball, and instead of making any move towards the basket, their goal is to look to the wings to see if they can't throw the ball out for a three. When I did my segment with my buddy Jason on the NBA playoffs earlier this year, one of my problems with Indiana was the fact that it looked like when their threes weren't going down, they just ran out of ideas. And I don't know that that's specific now to Indiana. Indiana didn't shoot great from three-point, but it certainly wasn't terrible. They shot 39%, and I think any NBA team is going to continue to shoot a lot of threes if they can get a 36 to 40% make on three-point shots. But the Phoenix Suns, they shot 30%. There was 2 minutes left in the game, and the Suns, I believe, were down 7 or 9, and it just looked as if they had acquiesced to the fact that they were going to lose the game because they couldn't make a three. This is like bunting in baseball or hitting to the opposite field when there's a shift on, or even stealing bases in order to manufacture runs. There's things now that go on in the modern game, and you look at the way it's being played, and because it is now such a part of the culture of the game, anyone that consistently goes to the basket is going to have success because no one really wants to guard in the NBA. Defensive positioning is bad. You're going to be able to go to the rim, potentially get that layup, that dunk, but you're going to get fouled. The game has completely moved away from that, and it makes these regular season games boring as hell to watch. It's clear that the NBA recognizes this as a problem because they've had this nonsensical idea, this NBA Cup, that's convoluted and doesn't make a lot of sense. It's an in-season tournament that no one really cares about and that doesn't really help the ratings. But the fact of the matter is that regular season NBA basketball is shitty. It's a shitty product. I know a lot of NBA stalwarts that don't like the college game as much because it's much slower and it doesn't have as much action towards the basket. But there's no longer action towards the basket in the NBA game. And in the college game, I understand there are fewer games, so the kids can play harder. There's a hell of a lot more defense. So the reason why there's not a lot of action towards the basket in the college game is that you can defend much further up the court and much harder in the college game than you can in the NBA game. But in the NBA game now, no one's even trying to make an effort to get to the rim. They're all shooting threes. They are running an offense in order to get people open to shoot the three, and they're trying to run a defense to prevent teams from shooting the three. Regardless of the X's and O's, it's just not a very aesthetically pleasing product to watch. It's especially frustrating when you watch a team fail at the three-point line like the Phoenix Suns did last night when they have players who are so capable of getting to the rim and do so when they want to. It's just, do they want to every series? Do they want to every quarter? And that desire, or lack thereof, ends up deciding the outcome of the game. That's a frustrating game to sit through and watch when you think to yourself, man, if these guys had actually just gone to the rim because they couldn't hit their threes, they would have won this game. If they'd actually played a little bit smarter, even when they're trying to run that action on the wings to get three-point shots when they had guys who were just standing around, they could have been cutting to the basket, making some easy layups, and at least getting some flow to their offense. They just won't do it. My final thought is on Kevin Durant. He had 37 points, and his box score looked really good if you weren't at the game and you didn't watch the game. If you were at the game and you watched him, he looks old. He looks very, very old. Kevin Durant, professional scorer, no doubt, still can put the ball into the basket. But as far as being the linchpin of your basketball team, having the offense run through him, you're going to experience a number of problems. Namely, that guys who are 15 years his junior aren't afraid of him like they may have been 5 years ago. He got the ball taken from him numerous times. He fumbled the ball numerous times and got it taken from him. I heard a couple people in the stands saying, well, they're rusty because they've been hurt and now they're trying to get back into their rhythm. But the way that they were playing, it did not look like a team that was going to get back in any kind of smooth rhythm unless they were hitting their threes. And you can say that for any NBA team. When the ball has to go through your aging superstar that can't stay healthy, you've got problems. As high as I was on the Suns when they were 9-1, the reality of this season has hit. These guys, hold on, let me be specific. Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, they can't stay healthy and on the floor together for long enough to gel and to have an offense that is growing. That's the word that I'm looking for. Growing in its maturity. With these guys going in and out of the lineup so often and you not having an offense that is predicated on getting to the basket, it's like you're running these plays in preseason over and over and over again. Guys are trying to figure out what their place is in the offense and where they're going to be on the floor. It's been years since I've been a big NBA regular season viewer, but I think the NBA has an extremely difficult task to try to draw in new viewers while maintaining the old guard, keeping people involved, intrigued, engaged throughout the course of a regular season if this is the product that it's going to put forward.
Act 3. The New York Jets are now the Detroit Lions.
As I have stated on this podcast numerous times, on numerous occasions, I divorced the Detroit Lions because they had such incompetent owners in the Ford family that I had resolved myself to the reality that they were never going to be good until the Fords sold the team. And a lot of people have come back, oh, well, you were wrong and you're an idiot. And those two things are true. But I wasn't technically that wrong. What happened was, and this has not been a story anywhere but here, dear listener, I'm the first to break it. The reason why the Detroit Lions are worth a damn in the year of our Lord 2024 is because, unlike in the past, where it had been successor after successor of dumbass male Ford family member, Martha, the female, finally took over and looked at the debacle that was the Detroit Lions over the course of listen to what I'm about to say. Listen. 70 fucking years. 70 fucking years. That's not an exaggeration. Go look at the calendar. Go look at the dates. For 70 years, they had fucking idiots running that organization. And she looked at it and said, all I have to do is not do what they did. What did they do? The team was nothing more than a boys' club. They became enamored with the people they became enamored with, whether they be general managers or coaches, people who proved themselves to be incompetent and then alienated or fired people that proved to be competent. Why? Because the incompetent would kiss the ring, and the competent wanted to do what was right for the organization in order to be successful on the football field. Martha, coming into it with no ego, in fact realizing, hey, I don't know much about football at all, hired the right people, refused to meddle in their affairs, supported everything that they did, from general manager, president, to the coaches, to the coaching staff. And lo and behold, when everyone's rowing in the same direction, so to speak, and the boat is picking up steam, the Detroit Lions are successful on the football field. Do I pull for the Lions? Of course I do. I'm not a rabid fan. I'm not going to be watching religiously every game that the Detroit Lions play or looking at any of the articles. I'm just not going to do that. And the reason being, Martha isn't a young woman. Martha's going to pass away, and you're very likely going to have another one of those male Fords come in and take over, and those fucking idiots have a 70-year track record. Whatever she builds, they can destroy, and right quick. Perfect segue into the New York Jets. Now, I'm using the New York Jets as a proxy for all of these incompetent teams that have owners that think they know more than they do and have been the catalyst for the failure for decades. Who do we have on this list? Dan Snyder is a great example. He's no longer in the league. That makes me sad. Just for the lulz, as the kids like to say, the laugh out louds. He's no longer in the league, but we do have ourselves a Jerry Jones. We do have ourselves a Jimmy Haslam. And we do have ourselves a Woody Johnson. And the article in The Athletic that came out this week is one of the most amazing pieces of inside scoop into the way an NFL team is operated, is managed, is run that I have ever seen. This is on par with the expose that was done in the Washington Times all those years ago about Dan Snyder that opened up the floodgates to a number of additional exposés about how he ran the Washington Redskins. It's funny that this story takes place in New York because New York fans generally align with certain teams. In other words, if you live in a certain area of New York, you will be a New York Metropolitans, New York Jets fan. Where if you live in other areas of New York, you might be a New York Giants fan and a New York Yankees fan. What is there in common with being a New York Jets fan and a New York Mets fan? Well, for years, they had the most incompetent ownership groups, the New York Jets, Woody Johnson, and the New York Mets, the Wilpons. Both of these organizations so incompetently managed that you had interpersonal conflicts, that you had power struggles, organizational decisions that were being batted around by different stakeholders, all displayed to the public via media leaks. The Wilpons were petty. Woody Johnson is petty. The Wilpons were obsessed with the image of the New York Mets. The Mets had always been the little brother to the New York Yankees, and the way that the Wilpons managed that organization reflected as much. That the specter, the shadow of that little brother syndrome, it influenced the decisions that they made, and they often looked petty and desperate and stupid. Hold my beer, says Woody Johnson. The Mets were run by a father and son duo. The father allowing the son, as he said himself, to grow in the job. That's how he put it. Someone who had absolutely no knowledge of how to run a baseball team, had no experience doing so, and the owner of the team, the father, the patriarch says, well, you know what? I'm just going to let my son grow in the job. I'm going to let him learn in the position, and if we have some growing pains as a result, so be it. Of course, that turned out in the Mets being one of the most mismanaged franchises in Major League Baseball, earning them, rightfully, unfortunately, the moniker of LOL Mets, Laugh Out Loud Mets. Hold my beer again, says Woody Johnson. Here we have in this article from The Athletic numerous leaks from within the organization about how that organization is run. A, that Woody Johnson is obsessed with the image of the Jets, and perhaps not what you would call a little brother type syndrome, but just an inferiority complex because of how incompetent the Jets are on the field, making decisions that I believe Woody Johnson thinks, are going to be perceived as smart, but most people look and say, this is just another stupid move by a guy who doesn't know what he's doing. And B, add to that, the cherry on top of this shit sundae, the fact that this man is allowing his teenage sons to influence the decisions of the football team and insert themselves where they please within the organization. The big takeaway from the story is going to be the fact that Woody Johnson was willing to let go of a very good trade for Jerry Jeudy, a wide receiver, because his sons thought that the Madden rating of the player was too low. Madden being, of course, a video game where numbers are assigned based on some algorithm that's created by software developers for the video game. That's the headline type story. But what I found more troubling was the fact that these teenage kids come in with their friends into the locker room pre and post game. This is on football Sundays or Mondays. Come in with their friends and openly make comments about players, not even to their face, but just in the locker room about player performance, particularly negative comments if the players had a bad game, in what can only be regarded or qualified as a power play that they're showing off to their friends that they can walk in the middle of a pro football locker room and talk shit about players that just had a bad game. Where did they learn this from, you ask? It turns out that Johnson himself has pulled that stunt, and his sons have probably seen him do it. Johnson routinely meddles in executive decisions. Yes, I see you, Detroit Lions. I see the Ford family over the course of decades and decades thinking that they knew better about how to manage a team, whose value is what, which players should be where, which coaches were deserving of keeping their jobs or not. As much as it is these guys are stupid and they don't know what they're doing, they don't realize what instability they're sowing within the organization when any of the stakeholders who have been given apparent authority by the owner can then be unanimously and arbitrarily overruled, and then have that person in this beta state where they've just been emasculated have to go out and do exactly the opposite of what they believed was the right decision. They have to carry out orders from someone who they don't think knows what they're doing in order to keep their job. What executive would want to go work there? What coach would want to go coach there? What player would want to go play there? There may be hope for a team like the Dallas Cowboys that when Jerry Jones passes away, because he's never going to give up control of the team until he does, that Stephen Jones, his son, may come in and make the kind of changes that have been necessary for 15 years and the Cowboys will enjoy success. I'm thinking of, and I can't remember the guy's name and I'm not going to look it up, but the owner of the Blackhawks, who for years and years and years was such a bad owner that there was actually a state of animosity between the fandom in Chicago, all of the fans, and the team. Their attendance was atrocious. That guy passes away. His son comes in and is like, I'm not doing anything that my father did. Lo and behold, within 5 years, you've got a Stanley Cup contender. And 10 to 15 years later, you have 3 Stanley Cups. Does anyone in New York have that same type of optimism? If Woody Johnson has already empowered his kids to come into the locker room in a defeat and start talking shit about players? Does anyone have any confidence that there's going to be a level of insight, football acumen from these two sons that they are using a Madden rating to rate players in an actual physical real league? I lived it, dear listener. I lived it with the Detroit Lions for 20 years. I lived it with the New York Mets for 20 years. God bless you, Steve Cohen. He got off Twitter. He got away from chirping with the media about the team. He's given control to people who know what they're doing, and he's relied on their decisions. And the Mets are on an upward trajectory. There's no doubt about it. They are on an upward trajectory. Does that mean they're going to win the World Series next year or the year thereafter? I don't know. No one can predict. But do I like their chances to be competitive in not only their division, but in competing for World Series? Yes, I do. No matter what changes come out of New York, no matter what changes come out of Arlington for the Dallas Cowboys, do you have any faith that they're going to be competitive next year in their division? Are they going to be competing for Super Bowls? No. It's one thing to think, well, if I just suffer enough with this coach or this player, this team could get better. When it is the owner, perhaps you, unlike me, dear listener, won't divorce that team, but you're damn well ready for a trial separation that's going to last more than a year or two. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.